Hello everyone and welcome back to another What's in Bloom video, this time for the month of July. We have quite a lot in bloom for the month of July, especially these last week or so. Quite a lot of buds have opened. There's one orchid which was in bloom which we do not have on display today, and that was the Paphiopedilum Lady Isabel. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to water it for a few days because I was away for work, and since it was still potted in bark, that was too dry for it and it dropped all of its flowers. But we still have the Saints Within with us here today, and it's still looking quite good, even if it is beginning to fade somewhat. So we'll have to make do with that. But we have quite a lot to get through this time, so let's just get started with the first one. And let's start with the one at the back, which kind of stacks perilously on top of the other pots, so I can get into a nice shot. We begin with the Phalaenopsis David I, which is a cross between the Gigantia, Phalaenopsis gigantia, and Phalaenopsis sumatrana. And one of the things I absolutely adore about this plant is its extremely pendant growing habit. So I usually have this one hanging either from the wall or from the ceiling. And you can see the leaves are super pendant, the flower spike is incredibly pendant, even the flowers are kind of slightly cupped facing downwards, and you have this cascade of roots. Everything here really gives a suggestion of gravity, and I like that. It's a very dynamic plant. Beyond that, I also just love the big leaves that it has, because see, those are some nice large leaves, which it definitely got from its Gigantia heritage. And currently it's in bloom for the third time. The first time was last November in 2019 when I bought it. Then it bloomed again for me, I think somewhere around February, and now again for the third time in June and July. So I'm really quite happy with this Phalaenopsis. It keeps extending the same spike. It hasn't made any new spikes. It is making plenty of new roots, and it has grown this leaf for me since November and is now growing this one as its newest lovely glossy leaf. So all in all, it's doing very well for me actually. But now I'll take you in for a close-up of the flowers. So the flowers are relatively simplistic, but I really quite like them. They have a sort of muted background that fades from white to kind of greenish yellow at the tips. And then you have this red kind of striping or spotting that's more vivid towards the tips and then gets a little bit faded towards the center until you have this kind of muted brown orange around the nose. And I really quite like it. It's a little bit understated, but it suits the overall aesthetic of the plant, I think. And I quite like the brighter yellow here at the lip. You have the really fuzzy hairs on the lip and that nice purple color that doesn't really come back anywhere else, that really stands out. On top of that, I really like the structure of the flower, the consistency. It's a very thick and glossy kind of flower, and that's always something I quite like about the more summer blooming type of Phalaenopsis. But more than the way it looks or its structure or anything like that is the smell. The smell is really quite nice. I can't describe it very well. It's just very typically floral, but it's quite strong actually. And usually when I walk past it in the living room, I do get a nice whiff of it. And that's actually really quite nice. I quite like that. And yeah, all in all, I just really like this orchid. Usually when it flowers in clumps of 3 or 4. Like now it has 3. I think when I bought it, it had 4 flowers. And the second time it made 4 buds and unfortunately blasted 1. So usually it opens about 3 or 4 flowers at a time, and it really does open them kind of at the exact same time. Like there was maybe a 2-day difference between the last one opening and the first one opening. So it has a very simultaneous showing habit, which I always really like. Paphiopedilum Saints Within is without a doubt the largest orchid that I own. Just look at the size of that thing. Just for a size reference, I'll put my bellina next to it. There you go, that's my bellina standing next to the Saints Within. It's huge. And I have difficulty finding a good spot for it in my room. But honestly, in my opinion, all that space it takes and the difficulty I have at placing it are absolutely worth it for the gorgeous flower. Now, unfortunately, you don't get to see it at its best because this one has been in bloom for, I think, more than a month now. and it's starting to fade, especially after some mistreatment from me. I didn't manage to water it as much as it needed watering for. And you can see that some of the flowers are already fading, like this one. I mean, this one's a bit funky from the start. It made the whole flower normally, and then the lip just kind of became wonky. I have no idea what was up with that one. But the one all the way at the back down there, you can see the lip kind of fading. So this one I think is going to drop its flowers very, very soon. But before that, I still just want to show it to you because I still think it's majestic. I didn't have any Paphiopedilums before I got this one and Lady Isabel, and I am so happy that I got them. They are beautiful, and they really do draw the eye in a room. So the flowers, first of all, they are thick, they are glossy, they are hairy, they're striped, they're veined, they're dotted. They have everything that you want in a flower, all mixed together, and somehow it looks nice. I just really love also these long trailing sepals. I've heard in some types of multifloral Paphiopedilums they can become, they can keep growing until they basically hit the surface, so they can get really, really long. This is not one of them. But one day I hope to own one of those as well. But for now, I am extremely happy with the Saint Swithin. I love the kind of this backboard, the dorsal sepal that it has. It's beautiful. Those stripes just make such a great contrast with the creamy background. And this one's a lot calmer at the back. But also the veining on the lip and everything. And there's just too much to talk about with this flower. But either way, you have eyes, you can see it. So I'm just going to take you in for a few close-ups and really try and capture the texture of these flowers because it's pretty amazing. Oh, I am so glad that my camera seems to be focusing on those tiny hairs. You see that this little, what I call the backboard, because it reminds me of like backboard in basketball, but I think it's called the shield in Paphiopedilums. You can see all the tiny little hairs on it, but not only there, but also here on the petals. You can see, whoops, all these tiny little hairs. And that's just really, really, really cool. In fact, talking of hairs, I think I see a cat hair here as well. Of course I do. They're everywhere. It's worth it, trust me. Cats are amazing. And if you look at those dots, and I'll try to get a bit more of an angle. If you look at those dots, some of them look like they're almost like on top of the overall texture of the petals, especially when you get to the edge of the petals. And of course they all have like these little hairs. They remind me kind of like, you know how some people have these moles that kind of like stick out and they're dark and they have like this single dark hair growing out of it? That's what they remind me of, which is pretty weird, but you know, I love it, it's great. And you can see from this angle as well that the very back of the pouch, like that little throat back there, whoops, sorry, I'll try not to touch the flower, it's also hairy. Yeah, it's just a really wacky flower and I absolutely love it. It's so great. My boyfriend insists that there isn't a scent, but I insist that there is. It's just not very strong, but it's definitely there if you sniff the flower. I think it smells quite spicy and peppery actually. The only thing that remains to be seen is how well I actually handle the orchids. Can I actually get it to rebloom and can I keep it in the amazing state that it is today? Because let's focus on the plant behind there. As you can see, it has so many fans and it's, you know, with the exception of this leaf, which is down the front, super green. And yeah, I hope I can keep it healthy and allow it to grow well. Next up is the Catasetum Pengang Jumbo Sweetheart. And I am so glad that I'm able to catch this in bloom right before I go. Because last year it was in bloom for only, I remember 5 days. It was very short. It's one of those very short flowered Catasetums, which is a shame because the flowers are quite spectacular actually and very, very large. You can see on the leaves that this plant has suffered a bit of abuse this year. It has quite a lot of sunburn because I left it out on the balcony and I didn't lower the sunshade on time. And of course, you know, the days were getting hotter and hotter and longer and longer. So one day it was a bit too much and the leaves burned, but I didn't stop it from flowering. So I'll take you in for a close up to actually see those. So one thing that's always very striking about these flowers is the deep wine red color and those really long trigger hairs. Now, if you touch one of those trigger hairs, and I mean, you know, these white things here, with the Catasetum, it has this mechanism where it kind of shoots out the pollinia at you and it kind of sticks to your finger. So I'm not going to do that, because once I do that, the flowers are even shorter lives. But anyway, it's a cool feature, and if you wanna scare a guest or something, just tell them to stick the nose in there, and they might have some pollinia stuck to their nose. A cool detail is the throat there, where you can see that the wine red kind of breaks up, and it's gets this kind of cool yellow patterning in there, and you actually have a very interesting contrast in texture and substance in this flower as well, because while the lip is incredibly thick and glossy and waxy, the sepals here are really papery actually, and they almost look like the petals of a flower that's already withering, but it looks like that the moment it opens already, so it's always kind of looks old, those upper petals, which is interesting. So you can see from the side as well that it has a very long nose, and this big white thing you see at the bottom, that's all part of the mechanism that shoots out the pollinia. So if you have a fly land on it or some other, usually it's bees that pollinate these flowers, and then it gets shot by the pollinia and they fly off days to spread it elsewhere. All in all, I think these flowers are very striking actually. They're elegant with their really large bowl-like base or lip, and then the color is just very eye-grabbing as well. But another thing I haven't told you about yet is the scent, and it's the only plant I own that kind of smells like bubblegum. Definitely bubblegum, and maybe you could get a hint of toothpaste out of there, but it's definitely far more bubblegum than it's toothpaste. So if that's something you like, this is the one for you, Catasetum Penguin Jumbo Sweetheart. Next we have a Cattleya type, of which I don't have very many, but this was the very first Cattleya type that I bought, and it's the Procatavola Golden Peacock. And it's in bloom for me for the second time now. It's bloomed on one growth back here, then it skipped one, and now it's in bloom again. And this one was created during winter, so I think it just didn't grow quite well enough for it to flower. But now with the spring growth, it's bloomed once again. And you can see 3 flowers here, and there is in fact a 4th flower coming very, very soon. So there should be 4 flowers at the end on this display. And I always quite like this orchid. It goes through a bit of a color change. When it first opens, you have this kind of darker brownish orange. But as it ages, you can see with this one here, it becomes a little bit lighter in color. And at some point, it really becomes a very vivid orange, actually. And I'll see if I can find a photo from last year where I have that vivid orange that I can show you. It does not have a scent, which is unfortunate. It's one thing the Cattleya types are famous for are their scents. But this one, unfortunately, I haven't been able to detect any sort of scent. I do very much like the shape of the flower. I'm not a fan of those really frilly, big, floofy Cattleyas. I like the more streamlined, modern looking ones. So, you know, you have the very narrow petals and there's not, you know, straight edges. And another thing I quite like about this flower actually is the lip. So the lip is this nice kind of golden orange or golden yellow, and then it has these specks of bright red on it. And it's just very nice. You have a very simple, streamlined flower, and then you have this little bit of detail on the lip that makes it stand out. So that's, I think, the one main thing that drew me to this flower, just a little bit of detail on a very simple flower. I remember from last time that the golden peacock is in bloom for a little while. I remember something like 3 weeks. So unfortunately, I think it will be out of bloom when I get back. But it's such a reliable grower and has such a great root system that I have no doubt it will be back in bloom in another few months. So I'm not going to miss it too much. It'll be fine. And these are the last 2 orchids that are in bloom this month. I want to do them together because then I can show you the family resemblance. Well, not quite. This one isn't actually genetically related to that one, but it is a cross of this species type with another one. This is the Phalaenopsis samara. And here we have the Phalaenopsis bellina. And the samara is a The samara is a cross between the bellina and the violacea, which unfortunately I do not have in bloom. Actually, I don't even have a proper violacea. I have a violacea variation alba, which has never bloomed for me so far. But in the future I might have a proper Violacea. Either way, for now, I have these two. And I actually have two samaras. I have this one, which is bellina crossed with Violacea. And I have a second one, which is actually the other way around. It's Violacea crossed with bellina. And what that means is that this one had bellina as its pod parent and Violacea as a seed donor. Whereas the other one had the Violacea as pod parent and the bellina as a seed donor. And it's a rule of thumb in orchid hybridization that the pod parent passes on more of its traits than the seed donor. And you kind of see that with the leaves here. If the other samara starts to bloom, I'll make a proper video about this. But you can see that it has really nice round and broad leaves that the bellina also has. And my other samara has much more narrow leaves like a Violacea. Either way, I'll get more into that once I also have the other samara in bloom and I can actually show you the differences. But for now we're here for the flowers. So let's start with the bellina. The bellina is an absolute classic in most orchid collections. I think it's probably the most collected Phalaenopsis species, and for good reason. You have a beautiful flower with a beautiful calm white to green fade on the background, and then you have this really vibrant pink on the nose and the lateral sepals. I have to say, actually, the camera is not showing the color properly. In real life, the pink is actually a bit more blue. It comes a little bit closer to purple than pink. Maybe I can fix it with post-processing, but it's not actually as pink as it looks here on the camera. Last year when it bloomed, I was a little bit confused because I always heard the scent to be described as like Fruit Loops or at least very fruity. But when I had it last year and I smelled the flower, it always smelled a lot like green tea to me, and there was no bit of fruitiness in there whatsoever. This year, however, the fruity scent is definitely there. The first day that opened, it was still green tea. And I was like, well, maybe I just have an odd bellina, or I just smell things differently. You know, those things can be very subjective. But then after 2 or 3 days, there was this definite fruity tang that came to it. And now, I gotta say, it's full-on fruity with a little bit of green tea in there. So maybe last year, because I bought in bloom, it was still struggling to get used to my environment. It didn't really show me the full palette of scent or fragrance. But now it does, and I gotta say, it's intoxicating. It is delicious. It actually makes my mouth water to smell this flower. So if you are someone who likes orchids with nice scents, the bellina is definitely one for you. It's delicious. As you can see, it's creating a second bud over here, so we'll have more to enjoy in the future. And I don't doubt that... Oh, I see a third bud also forming. There you go. You got a third bud coming right over here. Oops. So I'm sure that even after coming back from my holiday, I'll still have plenty of bellina flowers to enjoy, which really makes me quite happy. Next we have the samara, which is the hybrid between the bellina, which I just showed you, and the Violacea, which I don't have here today. And this one has some differences from the bellina, of course. It still has the nice round leaves, as I said before. It still has that beautiful pale green background, and that's a very similar shade of pink purple coming from the heart and spreading out. Obviously it has a lot more of the purple in this flower. And the other big difference, actually, more than how it looks in the colors, is the scent, because the Violacea is another very famous orchid when it comes to scent, in that it smells like cinnamon, like very strongly like cinnamon. So what do you think the samara smells like? I'll give you a hint. It really does smell like a mix between the bellina and the Violacea. It's very fruity cinnamon and it's great. This is one of those flowers that I can't stop sniffing. So every time I walk by, I need to take a little sniff, just a little whiff, you know, a little pick-me-up. And it's delicious, honestly. I really, really like it. One interesting detail that you don't really see on the bellina is this kind of patterning in the purple pigment. You can see here that there's like kind of tiny little stripes or spots that kind of flow into the more overall color. And the bellina is a lot more solid in color. So that's a cute little detail that the samara has, which gives a little bit more life, in my opinion. I think if I had to choose between one of the two, I wouldn't be able to, honestly, which is a bit of a cop-out. They're both delicious smelling, they both look really nice. I think I like the look of the flower on the samara slightly more than the bellina. But I like the plant of the bellina a little bit more than the samara because it just looks so big and healthy and good. Either way, they're both fantastic orchids. I can recommend both of them wholeheartedly to anyone who enjoys growing Phalaenopsis orchids and anyone who enjoys growing fragrant orchids. So if you are looking to give the Polychilus genus a go, these are two great orchids to try. So thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them down below in the comments section. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you disliked it, give it a thumbs down. And of course, if you'd like to see any more of my videos in the future, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And I'll see you here next time. Bye!